Hello, and welcome to the Wendell Foster June 2021 in-service. My name is Wesley Gaynor, and before we get started today, I would like to review with you our mission and vision here at Wendell Foster. Our mission is to empower people with disabilities to realize their dreams and potential. Our vision is to be the premier provider of rehabilitative, community-based, and residential services. So for today's training, we're going to discuss earthquake response, evacuation, safety care, and COVID-19 updates. To begin our training, let's start with earthquakes, and in particular, their danger and how we should respond. So with small or moderate earthquakes, they can last only a few seconds and represent no emergency risk. During these events, ceiling lights may move and some minor rattling of objects may occur in your home. You might feel a slight quiver under your feet if you're outside, and if you're close to its source, you may actually hear a loud bang followed by shaking. A large earthquake can last up to several minutes and be considered a natural disaster if its epicenter is near a densely populated area, or its magnitude is large enough for the region. Now, during this event, the ground or floor will begin moving, and sometimes this happens violently. So whether you're far away or close to the source, you'll probably feel shaking followed by a rolling motion, much like being at sea. If you're far away from the source, you might see buildings start to sway and hear a roaring sound. You may begin to feel dizzy and are unable to walk during the earthquake. If you live in a high-rise or multi-story building, you might experience more swaying and less shaking than in a smaller single-story structure. When this occurs, lower floors will shake much more rapidly, much like in residential homes. The upper floors will start to sway with a slow movement, but the buildings will begin moving from side to side. Furnishings during an earthquake that are unsecured could fall over and pose a risk to people who are around it, or these objects could actually slide across the floor or be thrown with damaging force across the room. Any unsecured light fixtures and ceiling panels may start to fall and windows could break. Along with this, the fire alarms and sprinkler systems may be activated, and lights and power may go off. In order to prepare for an earthquake, you need to look around your apartment and identify any heavy objects that may need to be secured to prevent them from falling over. Secure the tops of top-heavy furniture to a wall by anchoring them to the studs and using flexible fasteners. Keep heavy items on lower shelves and secure expensive or fragile items that if damaged would be a significant loss. Affix mirrors, paintings, and other hanging objects securely so they don't fall off hooks. And always review the emergency plan with your teammates as much as you can. Now that we've talked about how to prepare for an earthquake, we're going to discuss how to respond when it does happen. Before we get started, it's important to understand that the ICF and outpatient therapy each have their own all hazards emergency plan. Now, despite their plans being separate, they both work in unison towards the same goal. On the left is a copy of the ICF All Hazards Emergency Plan, and on the right is the Outpatient Therapy Emergency Procedure Manual. And here we see the location for each plan. Notice the difference for the ICF versus the outpatient therapy. When talking about earthquake preparedness, we must first address how to prevent or minimize injuries in the event of an earthquake. The big takeaway here is to make sure that heavy objects or furnishings are strapped to a wall, heavy objects are kept low to the ground, and that the emergency plan is reviewed frequently. During an earthquake, if you're outdoors, you want to stay outdoors. Don't run inside any nearby buildings because you can easily become injured by falling objects. And be aware of anything that can fall and injure you. This could be street lights, trees, or electrical lines, electrical poles. If you're near a crowd of people, make sure you move immediately away from them to avoid being trampled if they start to panic. And if you are near any buildings, stay away from the outer walls. They can easily fall and injure somebody that's near them. If you're inside during an event of this type, be sure you stay indoors. Again, you don't want to become injured from falling objects by running outside. Instead, seek shelter under a sturdy desk or table. Just make sure you hold on to the base of that table or desk so you don't get thrown from underneath. If you need to help someone who's in a wheelchair to get to safety, be sure you help them to the safety of a doorway. While this isn't a perfect location, it's the best we will be able to do in the moment. Now, because the ground will be moving, you're going to want to secure their chair from tipping over or rolling across the floor. As you can imagine, during an earthquake, heavy objects and anything made of glass like windows are dangerous. So be sure you stay away from any of those objects. If you don't have a door frame or sturdy desk to seek shelter under, then find an interior wall to move to and cover your head and neck. As mentioned previously, if you're in a crowded area, be sure to immediately move away from those people to avoid being trampled. After the earthquake is over, be mindful that electrical items should not be turned on. This includes appliances, light switches, and computers. Do not light a match or a lighter. Never enter a building that sustained damage until it's been deemed safe by maintenance or other authorities. And do not flush any toilets because the sewer lines could become broken. After an earthquake, if you find you don't know what to do, you can rely on the acronym RACE. RACE stands for Rescue, Alarm, Confine, Extinguish, and also Evacuate. You want to rescue people that you can in a safe manner as you evacuate the building. Sound the alarm if you can do so safely. If the fire doors have not been shut, go ahead and close them. If you can do so safely, put out any fires with a fire extinguisher. Finally, do not enter or re-enter any building that's not been inspected and deemed safe by a member of maintenance, incident command, or emergency personnel. After the earthquake, you will want to take care of immediate medical needs first. Be sure to stay away from broken windows and glass. Be on the alert for aftershocks. They can further weaken structures and cause more injuries. Monitor the local news and weather through weather radios in your department, or you can use your cell phone if those services are working. The ham radio in the Young Building can be monitored for more information by turning it on and listening to the radio traffic. It can also be used to contact help in a life or death emergency. For any other communication needs, if our primary communication is down, a runner can be sent to the OPD or OFD to request assistance. Be mindful of the potential for gas leaks that can occur with the shifting of the earth. The signs of a gas leak includes the smell of sulfur or rotten eggs, a hissing or whistling sound near a gas line, where you could see bubbling water. Some buildings on site have generators that turn on when there's a power outage. Make sure all necessary equipment, if safe to do so, is plugged into the red outlets. If the generator doesn't start, an evacuation may be needed. Now, this could be where people are relocated to another building on Wendell Foster property or to one of the pre-planned locations off-site. At any time, if you suspect a gas leak, do not use anything electrical. After an earthquake or any other disaster, if the chain of command listed in the ICF All Hazards Emergency Plan or the Outpatient Therapy Emergency Plan is not available, the nurse or the supervisor with the longest length of employment at Wendell Foster will utilize their departmental emergency plan to direct the staff at that facility. This plan is to be followed in its entirety. In instances where it does not provide direct guidance, it does provide you with a thought reference or a thought process of making the right decisions. So make sure you use those plans to help you make the appropriate decisions in times of emergencies. As incident command members arrive, they will work to assess the situation, assimilate information, and coordinate efforts. In the event of any emergency, all directions given by the chain of command are to be followed. A chain of command is simply a hierarchy that is established to identify who's in charge during an emergency. And here's an example of a chain of command. This is one that is a copy of what's found in the ICF's All Hazards Emergency Plan. At the top you can see where we have the incident commander and the CEO, and listed on down the chain of command gets broader. Toward the top it becomes more narrow. A succession of command is the person that will be placed in charge in any event that the person who would normally be in charge is incapacitated or not present. Here's the succession of command for Wendell Foster's ICF and outpatient therapy. A succession of command is a detailed list of who will take charge if the incident commander is unable or unavailable to perform their duties. As we see with the ICF, the incident commander is Doug Hoyt, the CEO. If he is unable to perform his duties, then it will be Kelly Turnham, the CPO, who will take on that responsibility. If she is unable to assume that role, then that duty falls to Sarah Poole, the Vice President of the ICF, and if she's unable to, it will fall to Kim Trainer, the Director of Nursing. The same thing applies to the outpatient therapy. If Doug Hoyt, Kelly Turnham, or Cindy Hayden are unavailable to assume the duties of Incident Commander, then that will fall upon the therapy directors. In the event that portions or all of Wendell Foster is no longer safe to inhabit, the decision may be made to evacuate. In the event that portions or all of Wendell Foster is no longer safe to inhabit, the decision may need to be made to evacuate both the outpatient therapy and the ICF. If this happens, patients that have transportation in the outpatient therapy will be directed to leave as long as conditions make it safe to do so. And this is also the time to call 911 if there are people that are injured. For the outpatient therapies, the evacuation will begin by moving the people who are ambulatory and then those who utilize wheelchairs. After everyone has been evacuated, the medical records should then be removed and secured. Now it's important to remember, during an emergency, the regulations of HIPAA still applies. During an emergency evacuation, each employee will have a role to assume along with the tasks that need to be completed. Now here we see the tasks that the administrator or incident commander needs to accomplish. This includes meeting with members of management to coordinate the evacuation efforts, contacting vendors, securing the facility, and establishing communications with staff and patients. The Vice President of Outpatient Services will be responsible for contacting OIG, Emergency Management, and the Medical Director. A staff member will then be designated to monitor the evacuation tracking log. The therapy directors will assist in coordinating the evacuation, completing the evacuation tracking log in their area, and keeping the channels of communication open for staff, patients, and family members. The office manager will need to contact whichever form of transportation that will be utilized to include ambulance services. They will then make sure each patient that needs one has a face sheet given to the ambulance personnel. The medical director will assist with the decision-making process in regards to patient transfers and emergency medical orders if the attending physician cannot be reached. At this time, maintenance will need to work with responding agencies in regards to the utilities. They will also need to support responding emergency agencies with building security and making emergency repairs of the facility. They should also be ready to assist when needed in shutting down all computers, electronic devices, and compromised utility systems. In the event of the ICF needing evacuation, Wendell Foster has identified and created partnerships with other agencies that can provide us a climate-controlled shelter in which to take refuge. These shelters are located as close as 1 mile away and as far as 50 miles away. For the ICF, the decision to evacuate will only be made by the administrator or their designee. If the administrator is not present, their designee is the nurse or manager that has the longest length of service here at Wendell Foster. Upon deciding to evacuate, the agencies listed need to be contacted, and their information is located in the ICF's All Hazards Emergency Plan. One of the first agencies to be contacted will be the local emergency management agency. They have a variety of resources that can be utilized to help facilitate this process smoothly. The other duties that need to be addressed include contacting and recalling all staff back to Wendell Foster, directing staff to perform certain tasks, and providing progress reports to the incident commander. The next step in evacuation is to communicate the situation to all residents and staff. A staff member will then be directed to be in charge of the resident evacuation tracking log, which can be found in the ICF's All Hazards Emergency Plan. A different staff member will be assigned the task of contacting families and responsible parties to inform them of the need to evacuate. All staff, parents, and guardians will need to be informed of the emergency phone numbers, including the phone number for the alternate care facility that everyone's being evacuated to. Now this can be found in the ICF's All Hazards Emergency Plan. The emergency go box is a gray plastic container that contains items that may be essential in any disaster and can be used to set up incident command either on site or at an alternate facility. This includes paperwork, caution tape, chem lights, Sharpies, dry erase markers, emergency blankets, lanyards with ID badges, and basic PPEs. This box should be taken to the receiving facility so incident command can be reestablished and the items can be used for the people that are being evacuated, such as the lanyards and ID badges. During the evacuation process, it's important that we notify our vendors that we're going to be moving locations. The information for these vendors can be found in the ICF's All Hazard Emergency Plan. They should be notified of the need to evacuate along with the address of the receiving facility. All medical records should be secured and ready for transport to the receiving facility. Being that these records contain protected health information, all efforts should be used to safeguard these files in accordance to HIPAA. Once incident command is established at either facility, the incident commander or the administrator is charged with tracking all progress of the evacuation and providing reports to the management staff. Management will take this information and convey it to their employees. An important task during the evacuation is tracking the location and status of each individual. This is performed through the resident evacuation tracking log. Also, a staff member will be designated to ensure that all supplies are packed and loaded for transport while ensuring that they're safeguarded both while en route and once it arrives at the receiving facility. When packing up the supplies, it's important to remember to include adaptive equipment, special need items, specialized medical equipment, and food processors. In regards to medications, it should all be packed and secure for transport. In the case of the receiving facility being just a short distance from Wendell Foster, the medication carts are useful for transporting medications. Just be very careful because these carts can tip and roll very easily in the vans or the bus. All temperature-sensitive medications should be kept in a cooler so they can maintain the appropriate temperature. When residents are being evacuated to separate facilities, it's important that the resident medications go with them in a secure manner, either while accompanied by a staff member or EMT if traveling by an ambulance or medevac. If a resident is being evacuated over a long distance, perhaps outside the geographic area, then critical medications should be carried in their go bag. Emergency medication boxes should accompany all buses for long distances with narcotics under a double lock. In these instances, a licensed nurse will be designated for each vehicle to ensure the medications are safeguarded. During any emergency situation, it's understandable that members of the community will be wanting to assist as needed, but please understand that the regulations regarding background checks are still in place despite any emergency situation. What this means is that any volunteer that's not past the regulatory criteria for concerning background checks cannot directly work with the residents. Volunteers that can be utilized to work with the residents are those that have passed a regulatory background check, have training in seeing to the needs of the chronically ill, developmental or intellectually impaired, and frail populations. It's also needed for them to be knowledgeable of methods to minimize transfer trauma during transport. When transporting the residents, they need to do so in accordance with their unit, acuity, or whichever method works best for efficiency. Each resident's go bag should be packed with the emergency packets, ID lanyards, and the medical records. Please refer to Appendix 7 in the All Hazards Emergency Plan for detailed guidance. I do want to take this moment to remind everybody the ID lanyards can be found in the Go box. The evacuation itself will occur in two phases. Now, Phase 1 is where the most medically fragile will travel by ambulance or medevac first. Phase 2 is where all other residents are evacuated by bus, van, or medevac after Phase 1 is completed. Before the last evacuating vehicle leaves the facility, all sensitive items must be secured. This includes turning off and unplugging all computers and electronics. While this is occurring, the non-essential utilities should also be shut down. The location and instructions on shutting these down is located in the ICF's All Hazards Emergency Plan. Finally, if safe to do so, it's important for at least one staff member to stay behind and safeguard the facility. While en route to the receiving facility, each vehicle should have at least one staff member other than the driver. If somebody becomes ill or terminal during the evacuation, the incident commander at the receiving facility will be notified. One of the first tasks for the nurses upon arrival at the receiving facility is to ensure the welfare of the residents and staff, as well as setting up a nursing office. So for today's training, now let's move on to safety care. Reinforcement is a term that refers to the strengthening of a behavior when it's followed by a consequence. When a behavior is reinforced, it will happen more often in the future. To reinforce a behavior effectively, the reinforcement must be immediate, distinct, and include descriptive praise. When making it immediate, you want to ensure that the reinforcement immediately follows the behavior you want reinforced. The reinforcement is distinct through using eye contact and the person's name. And when reinforcing a behavior, you also want to use descriptive praise. This is done by telling the person the great things they're doing instead of the negative things they've stopped doing. When it comes to reinforcement, everybody has different preferences. So in order to reinforce effectively, their preference must be identified. And it's also important to keep the reinforcement varied so you don't lose the value of the reinforcement through overuse. And finally, make sure you only reinforce the responses that are desired. These desired responses are identified within the individual's plan. A frequent reinforcement occurs when teaching a new skill or in a situation where the learner finds it challenging. Now, as the name implies, this type of reinforcement is quick and often. A random reinforcement is often used when working with a group or while someone is multitasking. A structured reinforcement is often found in behavior plans. This is when the steps to reinforcing a behavior is identified and outlined so staff can follow it with very clear expectations. And now we're going to talk about COVID-19 vaccinations and policies. Davis County is now yellow, which means that we can drop to monthly COVID testings. If we change back to the orange status, we'll have to go back to bi-weekly testings. So the question here is, do I still need to wear a mask while at work even though I'm vaccinated? And the answer is yes. The CDC continues to recommend masking in healthcare settings regardless of vaccination status. Now here's a great question. Do I still need to wear a mask at work now that the state mandate is over? And the answer is yes. We're going to continue to follow the CDC guidelines as well as the guidelines issued by our state regulatory bodies. This guidance includes masking in healthcare settings regardless of vaccination status. And as you can see here, all staff will need to continue submitting to signs and symptoms daily at the beginning of their workday, even if they've previously had COVID or have been vaccinated. So here's some good news. If you're considered to be fully vaccinated, what that means is it's been 2 weeks after your final dose. You do not have to submit to the ICF mandatory surveillance testing program unless you're displaying symptoms of COVID-19. If you would like to get the COVID-19 vaccination, you can find a vaccination site by going to www.vaccines.gov and search by zip code. As of June 17, 2021, there are over 21 providers within a 10-mile radius of Owensboro, Kentucky, and they all have in-stock vaccinations. Now, some of these providers include Owensboro Health Regional Hospital, Davis County Health Department, Walmart, Walgreens, Myers, CVS Pharmacy, and Kroger's, to name a few. For many of these sites, you don't even need an appointment. All you do is you walk in, let them know you want a vaccine, and they'll take care of you right away. Now, as to who's approved to get the vaccine, per the CDC, everybody 12 years of age and older are now eligible to get a COVID-19 vaccine. For more information on the COVID-19 vaccine, you can visit vaccine.ky.gov.
The COVID-19 vaccines can be our chance to get back to our plans, who we are, what we miss, to get back to each other, to life. But it's okay to have questions, like, how were the vaccines tested? In rigorous clinical trials among adults of diverse backgrounds. Can the vaccines give you COVID-19? You cannot get COVID-19 from a vaccine. Why should I get vaccinated? Protecting yourself also helps protect the people around you. Find the latest information at getvaccineanswers.org.
And now let's talk about Wendell Foster upcoming events. Our First Responders Barbecue is back to celebrate those who dedicate their lives to protecting our community. On July 22nd from 10:30 a.m. until 1 o'clock p.m., all local and active first responders are welcome to a free lunch and a tasty snow cone at Wendell Foster along with Wendell Foster employees. In addition to lunch, a car wash will be provided for all first responder vehicles off of Triplet Street thanks to the Action Club. If anybody has any questions or you would like to volunteer to help, you can contact Kara Howard at khoward@wendellfoster.org. On Friday, August 20th, 2021, at Ben Haas Municipal Golf Course, Wendell Foster is having its golf scramble as presented by Old National Bank. On Saturday, September 25th, 2021, Wendell Foster will be having its Forever a Difference Maker dinner, auction, and dance. This event raises money that's used to empower people with disabilities to realize their dreams and potential. If you would like to volunteer for this event, please contact Sarah Poole. On Saturday, October 23rd from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. at the Owensboro Convention Center, Wendell Foster will be hosting the Special Needs Expo. Please mark this on your calendar, and if you're free that day, stop by and say hi to those manning the Wendell Foster booth. On November 13th, 2021, Wendell Foster is hosting its annual half marathon as presented by Owensboro Health. To register for this event, simply go to wendellfoster.org/half marathon. If you would like to volunteer, please contact Sarah Poole. And that concludes the June 2021 in-service. Please take the time to complete your test and turn it in to me, Wesley Gaynor. Thank you and have a great day.